Hello everybody. In this video I will show you how to create logic for your web application within NoCode-X. As you might have imagined, logic is the cornerstone of any web application because without logic your web application would merely be a static design or at most a high fidelity mockup. Um, so that's why we created the action editor, which is actually the place within NoCode-X you use to create or modify logic. We created the action editor in a way that it is as easy as possible for you to use, and it offers you as much as freedom as possible within a no-code environment. Um, so let's dive in. I will try to show you how you can create logic by using an example where I create a small form and a button, and some kind of logic is executed when I click that button. This will only scratch the surface of this topic. I will use other videos to elaborate into details further. So let's start. I start by creating a page, just like I did in previous videos, which will contain my form. So I go to the templates overview, I hit create, I choose a web page here, and I call it my first form. And I hit create. Now I enter the form editor. Let's choose another screen type here. I'll add a vertical list to my page to keep the form nice aligned. Make it a bit bigger. Voila. I'll add a simple input field to my vertical list, and I'll add a simple button to my vertical list as well. When clicking the input field, I can change the code, which is the unique identifier for this component or element. So I can choose my first input as being the code. And I choose enter some value as being the label of this field. I can do so the same for my button, my first submit button. And I can change the label into submit right here. Now, this button needs some kind of logic attached to it. So what I can do is here open actions, and actions is actually the term we use within NoCode-X to describe logic. Open this up, and you'll see all the triggers that I can use for this element on the page. So I can choose on click here, which is actually the trigger that will be triggered when this button is clicked. If I hover over this, I get a little bit of an explanation on this trigger as well. I can choose the actions that I want to link to this trigger, but I have none in my application at the moment. So I can use this button here to create a new action. So when I click this one, you will see a new action appears, and I can click the edit button to start editing this action. The first thing that you need to know is every action that you create within NoCode-X has by default the name unnamed action, but you can easily change this by heading over to the action settings page, click this button, and just change the action name. Let's call it my first action. I can also change the icon here for recognizability within NoCode-X, or I can add a description for example, when I come back in 6 months and I want to know what this action actually does without having to scroll through and read through the actual logic. So now that I changed the name of my action, I can start building my logic. And the idea is that every action or piece of logic within NoCode-X has a start block. And you can add other blocks to your logic and attach them, link them up, and you can add blocks to those blocks and add blocks to those blocks and so on, and they will be executed in a sequential way. On the left side, you see all the functions or blocks that you can have access to. So you can use these functions to create your logic. If you hover each and every one of them, you'll see a small explanation, a small description of this block, what it actually does. So for example, if I wanted to write something to my log, I could search these functions and find something that would allow me to do that. Or I can use the filter function and just write log here. And then the first function that I see is called write to application log. And the description says write a line of text to your application logs. So that sounds about right. Let's use this. We can do this by clicking it, dragging and dropping it into place, and just hooking it up with my start block. Mind that you hook it up by going from start to your new block, not the other way around. You'll see the arrow. And the idea is that these blocks will be executed in a sequential manner. So the start block is always the first block, and then the write to application log block will be executed. If I select this block, I can now start changing properties of this block in the right panel. So I can change the name, I can change the icon, and I can change the description. And this is all meant for you when you return in 6 months or you pass this over to a colleague of you to understand exactly why this block has been added and what it exactly does. I'll leave it at how it is at the moment, and I'll go down to arguments, because that's where we change how this block is behaving. So I can change a couple of arguments of write to application log. Here we have the text, and the description actually says the line of text you intend to write to your application log. So let's fill in a value right here. So let's fill in, hey, ho, let's go. You can also add some placeholders. I'll dive deeper into those in other videos. And I can choose a level of severity. So let's just say this is an info. This is an info log message. Back to my template. Let's, for simplicity, just switch off authentication for now. And let us choose a readable and easy to use URL. Let's call this my first form. And let's head over to, well, my first form in a test page. So if I now visit this page, and I have to visit it on the development environment, of course, my form should be opened. If I now hit submit, and I go back to my application editor, and I open the application logs, which can be done by clicking the right top button right here, I should see, hey ho, let's go right here as an info message. If I click here, the action that actually writes this piece of logic, this piece of log will be opened. So I'm back here at my action. So what I want to do now is I want to read whatever has been entered in my input field right here. And I want to write it to my application log. So we have functions for that. So I can search input field, for example, and I see here a form function that's called get the value of an input field. And the description says get the current value of an input field and store it in the execution scope for further processing. So this sounds about right. Let me add it to my logic. I can just drag and drop it over the edge that was already drawn, or I can remove edges altogether and link them up all anew. So I can again change the basic info of this block, and I can again change the arguments which controls the behavior of this block. This block has two arguments that I can change. First of all, the component. Which component should be used? Which component should I use to get the value from? And if I head over back to my template, and if you remember, I changed the code of my input field to my first input. So let's head back over to the action, open up the block, arguments, and as you can see here, I can choose my first input as being the input field which I want to use to get the value from. If I were to have more input field on my screen, there would be more choices here for me to select from. What I can also do is I can define the variable name for the answer, for the value. And this is where the execution scope or the variable scope really comes in. So the variable scope can be compared to a list or a table of values which you can use during logic. The table of values are consistent of a key and a value. And what I can define here is what my key is, because my value is the value whatever is written in the input field. So for example, I can choose my input value as being the key which I want this block to store the value in the execution scope. Voila. And now this execution scope is available for me to use throughout the rest of my logic. So within the sequential following blocks, in this case, the write to application log, I can actually use the values within my execution scope or my variable scope. So I can change this text here. You can just delete it and choose to fetch it from the scope instead of writing it right here. So I switch to the scope, and then I can start selecting from scope. And what I see here is a lot of values that are by default on the scope, but I'm not interested in those right now. I scroll down and I see the values that I have written to the scope. So I select my input value in this case. And now I can start testing this again. Let's just enter Tristan was here. Let's just submit this. And then I can head over back to my application logs. And I see in this log, Tristan was here, was written. Voila. So those are the basics of logic building within NoCode-X. We will have more videos to elaborate on execution or variable scopes. So that's a really interesting topic within NoCode-X. That's really where the power comes from. And we will have videos on each of those functions that you can use to build your logic even further. So thank you for joining us. If you are interested in NoCode-X, please keep following us on YouTube, keep following us on LinkedIn, try out our product, and let's see each other in further videos. Bye.